put them on. They don't work properly.
Okay. Yeah,
we need to get that fixed. I keep forgetting.
Yeah, David's got to get that fixed. I think it's something in the board itself. I've switched adapters. Those are different adapters.
You can hear yourself, but we can't hear you because you're locked up.
I said that I don't think it's the adapters. It's got
the adapters.
I switched adapters. Those are not the same adapters.
Junky adapters.
The other ones are different adapters.
Is there something wrong with my board?
Must be. It's probably because you keep packing it with your luggage. It's full of your pocket lamp.
Make sure he's in a position here.
He's in position.
Yeah. Is this in my space wise? I want it to be able to see you more instead of having to. There.
You want to be able to see him?
Yeah, I don't know why you want to do that. Also, you want to be like yeah,
this, right?
There you go.
All right. Yeah, eyeball to eyeball.
Is everything good?
Everything is fantastic, David.
You're recording, aren't you?
Yes.
So,
Murray Voth, how you doing? You finally remembered to do it.
Well, it's our second one.
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Hey, if you're listening to this, last week's podcast was on with Rick White from 180 Minutes. Introduce him.
We didn't, did we? You're such a jerk, David.
Oh, we're terrible at this. Terrible. You know what we should do?
You should
hire people to do this.
You should take some lessons from some people.
Lessons?
Well, you guys
think I
like,
need a podcast coach?
You guys are have all the toys.
We do.
Like you got more colored buttons than I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
So does the toys make a podcast, or does the people make the podcast?
It's probably half and half.
It's half and half. Okay. Yeah. You know, I will say, even if you had really good equipment and terrible, terrible guests, because it's not us.
Well, how about if I be your best guest today?
Let's do it.
All right.
Hey, you brought up a really cool topic yesterday.
Are we going to do that one?
Let's do it.
Can you remind me what it is?
No, because I forgot.
Hey, introduce him. Murray Voth, RPM training.
RPM training. Yeah. You know what it stands for?
What?
Results, performance, and mastery.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Pretty good brand.
For sure.
Right?
Great White North.
Changing the industry. Yeah, Great White North. Changing the industry one shop owner at a time.
How do you feel about the heaters outside in front of the casinos when it's 55, 60 degrees?
People are wimps down here.
I agree with you. I'm not going to say I don't. I completely agree. This is crazy.
I'm hot down here.
Yeah, dude.
And everybody else is in jackets, the locals, right? Well, whatever. It's their climate. That's what they're acclimatized to.
Hey, listen.
Is it as dry are you on the West Coast,
so
East Coast?
Well, I'm 4 hours east of the West Coast. So most of my life's been in Vancouver. That's where my wife's from. I was actually born in the prairies. Very cold. Followed her, met her in college, followed her to the West Coast. 42 years later.
Do you have prairies, or is it like tundra?
No, we have prairies. They're just like North Dakota, Manitoba, Saskatchewan. It's just all of that. It just keeps going further north. Yeah. So you guys got to come up there and actually get a visual.
I mean, we don't call North Dakota the prairies. We call that cold. It's just cold up there.
Yeah. But
cold and oil.
So if anybody listening is from Washington State or knows Washington State, if you go east Washington State, like Yakima area, all of that, it's quite dry, deserty. We're just north. I just live north of that.
Gotcha.
So it's really hot and dry in the summer, which I love. Ponderosa pines, the whole bit. The winter, it's cold and dry and can be very snowy. But I bought a snowblower, first time in my life, a couple of years. Actually, you know what? I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. Yeah, I'm allowed to say this. So my first course I ever taught at Apex, 2019, you get a small honorarium for teaching.
Right.
They're very generous, like with your travel costs. I don't do it for the honorarium. I do it to serve the industry, but they cover your costs, a little honorarium. I bought my snowblower with that honorarium because it was U.S. dollars, and when I converted to Canadian dollars,
You were rich.
I was rich.
Right? Retire on this. How much they pay you? $500? Dollar? Well, yeah, when you convert it to Canadian.
Exactly, right? So double it.
8 million Canadian dollars.
Anyways.
We've talked a little bit about trying to do something in Canada at some point because of Jeff. Jeff really wants to do something.
Yeah.
And we actually did an episode with Jeff a while back where I read your message to me where we were talking about the fact that Canada is a very, very different animal when it comes to training.
Yeah.
Why is that? What's different about it?
I would say Canadians are a bit more skeptical when it comes to spending money.
Okay.
I find Americans in general, but let's go with shop owners, even the ones that aren't even that necessarily progressive are okay spending money on training or equipment, especially technical training and stuff like that. Canadians are a little tighter with their dollars. Like these are really generalizations, right?
Yeah.
We're such a broad nation. Like we have less people in all of Canada. We have more land mass than you guys. We have less people than California.
That's crazy.
So
We're really packed in tight in California.
right? So we're not packed in tight. So that means that we're hours of flights or hours of driving away. I mean, I listen to you guys' podcasts and, you know, like you're in Virginia one day and Kentucky the next day and Florida the next day. And we're just like, that blows our minds. Like,
Yeah.
That,
you know,
well, I mean,
We have planes. We don't have to travel by reindeer.
we have airplanes too, but
did you hear him say that you didn't have to travel by reindeer? You heard that, right?
by radio.
I mean, look, and I mean, here's the thing: is I'm talking to Jeff about it, and Jeff is saying, "Well, hey, like where I'm at, there's lots of people in lots of shops." And supposedly that, and I've looked at pictures, right? Because I've always like when I talk to somebody, and they're sharing with me, like, "Hey, here's where I'm at. Here's where the shop's at." I'll like look it up on Google Maps to try and get an understanding of what the place is like. And man, that's a pretty area he's in.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's a really nice spot.
But so we, 16,000 shops. So you guys apparently have 225, 250. So if 10% of your shops find management training, you're talking about 25,000 shops. If you have 10% of 16, you have 1,600, which chances are there are in Canada. Like because I have no Canadian shops that use Rick, who was just here. They use Cecil. These are all people that I collaborate with in camp, right? So it's there. But I think part of it is just lack of momentum because lack of bodies and size, I think. And then because we don't have the amount of money from the bodies, right? We don't have that. The associations don't have that. But I got to tell you, without going into any negativity, because we talked about this earlier about how do we stay positive in this industry, the associations in Canada have been revitalized. There are new directors in place. The old guard is gone. We had a thing called Canada Night here on Tuesday. I saw more Canadians here than I see, like in the industry, than I see all year because you can fly to Vegas from anywhere in Canada.
Yeah.
Easier than you can fly anywhere in Canada. Like seriously, cost-wise.
That's crazy.
I can fly from anywhere in Canada to Vegas for like 400 return. My town, which is a 45-minute flight from Vancouver, it's 400 return on any given day. An hour flight.
That's crazy.
Right? Because we don't have the volume of people. Right?
Well, so
right?
I talked to Jeff about his flights, and he could fly out of, I think he said Ontario. I don't know. Toronto. But he said that instead of doing that, he said it's cheaper and easier to drive across the border and
go
fly
to Buffalo, or Rochester.
Yeah, exactly. He said way easier.
Yeah.
Way easier.
Our airports all have 20% more landing taxes than your airports. We can go on and on and on, right? Which is not the point. The point is it's getting better. You guys are helping the conversation. I think we'll keep talking. We'll keep talking to associations, shops, the WDs, and start talking about getting some stuff going together. I do a thing with you met Andrew Ross, Indie Garage, Jobber Nation.
Yeah.
Great publisher. That's who I write for. I do a monthly podcast with him. He does a weekly podcast with industry people in Canada. I told Andrew when he walked up, I said, "I'm cheating on you with him, Andrew." we had a little bit of a laugh, but Andrew gets it. Andrew gets that we're all trying to change the industry, right? So. But I appreciate you guys' interest. And Jeff, and one of these days I should meet the guy, like next time I'm in his area or whatever. Or,
man, he's really excited about that concept. And maybe it's that you make it to AST next year. We're trying to get Jeff here next year.
Yeah. And the other thing is you guys have heard the term, that person's very provincial, right? Small towny or whatever. Well, our states are called provinces. We don't have provinces. And we tend to, because we're so big, we tend to be provincial, not because we don't know better, but because it's a 10-hour drive or a $500 flight to go somewhere, and so we just sort of stay in our provinces, right? So we're finally getting associations talking to each other across the country, right?
You know,
anyways,
we talked to Peter and Costa, and we were talking about doing another podcast with them, the guys from Australia. And they're like, half of our population is like all the way around the outside of Australia, right? Like it's all on the coastline, and the middle of Australia is just this big open area. That's what I envision when you're talking about this, is that it's just...
Well, Canada, so we're at the 49th parallel, right?
Right.
That's our border with you guys. I mean, there's some ripples and valleys and some changes there. 95% of us live within 100 miles of that border.
That's pretty crazy.
Right?
No, it makes perfect sense. It's cold if you go further north,
right?
The elk get mean. They attack
the
people.
grizzlies and the elk and the and the rest of it, right? Like
this dude just wouldn't survive.
I don't know how you survive that far north.
I don't know, man.
You guys got to come to our cities. Vancouver's very cosmopolitan. We have opera and ballet, and we have a football team.
He would definitely do the ballet. That's where he would be.
But that's like saying, Kansas City has opera and ballet too, but is it the same? It's like, but like we have casinos. I'm sure you guys have casinos, but it's not Vegas casino.
No, Anyways,
they're nice and clean and not icky.
I think the topic we wanted to talk about was, so you want to start a shop.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and you said you're doing a little bit of a paper or an article on this?
Yeah, and after we talked just a day or two ago, my brain went in a slightly different way to calculate it, and I think I got it all memorized here, because I'm watching that one group talk about, I want to become a shop owner, and I have questions, and then I see all these people asking questions about, what's the cheapest software, or what's the best of this, or what's the best of that. And there's some good answers. There's people saying it's not about the price, it's about the value, it's about what you get, it's about support. And then there's also the race to the bottom. I mean, that's how these groups are, right? And in terms of price. And there is some good advice, and there's some questionable advice going on there. And that's fine. I mean, it's not intended to be a, registered professional association or anything like that.
Right.
But I'm concerned that these generally younger people are asking the wrong questions.
Yeah.
And I'm really worried. And I know that there is a whole raft of young people that's tried to start a shop and went broke. And we are not hearing all of those stories, the pain of that. And I would like to speak into preventing that pain if possible.
We've talked a little bit here and there, and we've covered a little bit of this subject, and we really upset some people. We had some people get mad at us. The video about starting a shop, right? The guy with Lucky, remember that? Lucky's Garage.
Okay.
And we got comments, and they were saying, well, I did it with less than that. Because one of the things we were saying is, like, you need some capital before you start a shop. You need to have some money. And everybody says, oh, no, I started with no money at all. I started with nothing. I just went out and ran a shop, and I started. And I'm like, the point is not that you can't. But should you? Because it can be dangerous, right? Well, like in the long run.
So I was teaching, I don't teach technology. I'm so far out of it. But I do teach a concept in one of my classes about the value, understanding the value of what you're presenting as an advisor. Okay, so transmission services.
Yeah.
Right. Why do we do them? Well, I did them because of color and condition my whole career till I learned, because I'm not a licensed tech. I got into this from the service station side of things.
Yeah.
Do I know how to fix things? I've worked on almost everything that moves in my career, but anyways, I didn't know about so transmission fluid has anti-foaming agents in it. Not changing it because it's dirty, you're changing it when before it's dirty, because those anti-foaming agents wear out. That's what helps cool the transmission, because bubbly fluid doesn't transfer heat, right? Anyways, without going too deep into that, somebody says, well,
good point. You should change the transmission fluid, folks.
Anyways, so I had somebody respond, I drove my Chevy S10 for 500,000 kilometers. Do the math for the Americans. Divided by 1.6 and you're good.
See, Dutch, it's not that hard.
Anyways.
Was the kilometer?
Yeah. Somebody that I bumped into here was on a treadmill at their hotel that was in kilometers, and they were like, this is just way too slow.
I think it was Jeff telling me, and he said what we've ran into, and somebody else has told me this recently, but that the states where they've legalized pot, and Jeff said, oh, well, they did that a long time ago. But the guy's telling the story about, like, why it's such a big deal for them when it comes to the cars and the things that they have to do with their clients and how it changes things. And Jeff said, "Oh yeah, you're going to talk about how they changed their speedometer to mile per hour instead of kilometers, aren't you? And couldn't get it back." He's like, "No, they changed it from miles per hour to the kilometers." And so he's pointing out that like these stoners are getting in their cars and they push buttons and they can't figure out how to get back to the proper readings. So they're absolutely freaking out. And I'm like, seriously, it correlates with the legalization of marijuana?
I didn't even think of that because my truck has a button that goes everything from metric to right.
Yeah,
it changes it right.
Well, evidently, a bunch of people, as soon as they legalize marijuana, have been pushing that button
and they can't figure out how to go back. That's crazy. Anyways, so I had a guy in class. I drove my Chevy S10 500,000 kilometers, 350,000 miles, and I never changed the fluid. I don't believe in changing that stuff.
Yeah.
And I was kind of taken a bit off guard, right? Like, how do I answer that? Because I was going to say, well, yeah, you win the odd time. And then in the hallway at the break, an older gentleman said to this young fella, I had a grandfather that smoked since he was 9 years old, and he died at 112. And that's all the gentleman said. You guys get the point.
Yeah.
There are people who have smoked since they were 8 and lived to 112.
Yeah.
We also know how many people don't make it past 45.
People. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the whole point with the transmission thing. So now the whole point to your listeners is I don't want to wreck somebody's entrepreneurial dream because that may be why they were mad. It's like you were telling them you can't do this.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? So you guys know the whole thing about the male brain doesn't fully develop till like 26. So that frontal, a lot of bad decisions being made by young men, right?
Yeah, of course.
One of my clients said that the brain fairy took his son's brain away when he was 14 and he just turned 28 and she brought it back.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I can see that.
So this is an old guy talking to young people listening, right? I bet you if it was a young female looking at starting her own shop, I bet you she's going to do what I'm going to talk about.
Okay.
I guarantee you she's going to, because generally she's watching the money at home anyways.
Yeah.
Right? So can we start in a little bit of this?
Sure, dig in.
Okay, I don't want to break anybody's entrepreneurial dream, but folks, if you didn't own a shop, you would have a job because you got to pay your bills.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about a $60,000 take-home salary, pre-tax, all right? Some marketplaces that's decent, some marketplaces that's a little low, some marketplaces that's pretty rich, right? But let's go with a 60,000. Now, when I say that, another image comes to my mind. I'm sitting on a flight home. This is pre-COVID, and sitting beside a flight attendant, and she was a career flight attendant with our national area with Air Canada. They get paid fairly well with that airline. And what do you do? She was deadheading home and chatting a little bit. And she said, well, my husband's a mechanic. Because I started talking a little bit of what I did. Works out of our house, has 2 bays, and drives her insane. And I said, so does he charge? She says, no, I support the family. So now you start thinking about how many technicians' wives, and again, I'm trying to avoid the gender stereotype and get more women owning shops. I've met some wonderful, like I met Kathleen that here, women that own shops. And I think they do a phenomenal job. You think of the number of women who are nurses, lawyers, doctors, accountants, flight attendants, admin people, school teachers and principals who are the main breadwinner while this technician's figuring his poop out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm also looking at the pain that they're putting their family through, not just their own entrepreneurial dream, right? So some cautions. So you need 60,000. So let's do it. There's different angles of doing so. I'm going to go from the cost of a technician. So usually it's a technician opening a shop, right?
Yeah.
So that translates into $30 an hour.
Okay.
All right. So then technicians are out there going, well, if I charge 45, I can take home 30 and I'm going to be good. Well, no, let's talk about the gross profit on service. Do you guys know my whole thing on that? I don't use the word labor anymore.
Okay. What do you use?
Okay. I use the word service.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have service rate. We charge for service. It's service and parts. It's not labor and parts. A good friend of mine, Mark, says labor has a negative connotation to the consumer. It's always something that they had to pay for. We're going to charge for service. We're going to offer service, and we're going to charge for service.
I like
right?
that. I like that.
So engineers
did a whole video on it at Apex. I edited the thing.
I did talk about that. Yeah. So we know all about that. He has a better memory than you, apparently.
Clearly, but look. He doesn't talk to anybody. He's an introvert, right? He's really a terrible human being, all in all. I mean, he's just
I don't
awful.
know why you guys beat up on him. I saw quite a nice guy in his course, unless it was an act.
Thank you. See, I was nice and everything.
And he was like,
That was
he
an
was
act.
like linear, and he was like organized, and his thoughts came out. And so, Lucas, I don't know why you always beat him up.
My
Clearly,
the
that was
format on
a show. That was
the format on my PowerPoint got wonky. I should have paid attention to the email they sent out, and they're like, "Hey, it's going to come out looking like this. Make sure it's formatted properly." And I'm like, "Whatever."
None of us knew. You knew.
What do you mean?
You knew that the format was wrong. We didn't. In the audience,
I pointed it out several
you didn't
times
point
because it
it
was
out.
driving me nuts.
I know.
It was driving me crazy.
By the way, as
what
a
was
speaker,
different about it.
I don't know. What
It's just like instead of like the word didn't fit into the box, and so they slid the end letters at the bottom.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I shouldn't have pointed it out. You're right. I shouldn't have said anything. I would have gone with it.
As a speaker who has had that experience with my stuff, you can't help yourself but point it out because it's just driving you mad, right?
Yeah.
So, anyways, let's go with a 70% gross profit on service, right? Is what we're looking for, which means that you have to charge $100 an hour for your services.
So I want to ask because I want to be the devil's advocate here because a lot of these young guys coming in say, well, but I'm trying to get my leg in the door. I'm trying to get my foot in the door. And if I do that, nobody's going to come to me. Right, is what they say. I've got a really good friend of mine, and he owns like a motorcycle and small ATV repair deal, and he goes and he picks up the car and he does all this stuff. I've been telling him for months, dude, you need to be charging $120, $130 an hour because like you've got vehicle expense, you're traveling all over the place, you're not charging for the hours that you're traveling, and you're charging $60 an hour.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, you're not making any money. You're not taking anything home. He says, yeah, but I won't have any business. So what do you say to them?
That's probably one of the hardest things to reply to until you're actually on the other side of that experience. So I've been there when I was young as well.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, but so let me address that from a couple of angles. When you open up and you feel like you need to get the foot in the door, so you start off with a $60, $65, $70 rate without knowing it because you don't understand and you don't see the bigger picture. You begin to attract people who are looking for the lowest price. And that's a really common conversation in all of our circles, right?
Yeah.
You attract the wrong clientele. Now, we tend to use some really negative language around bottom feeder and things like that, and I want to avoid that. I talk about people that are financially challenged, legitimately financially challenged, either no fault of their own, which many of them is no fault of their own, and or whatever, some pure lifestyle choices or whatever. And then there's people who are what I call pathologically frugal.
Yeah.
That's my professional word for cheap. Tight as bark on a tree.
Yep.
Okay. So we have that bunch that are looking for that deal. Then you have people who see the new shop open up and they go, I'm going to go pick on this kid.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, listen, if I bring my 3 trucks in, can you give me a deal and blah, blah, blah. And the shop owner's like, eyeballs get big and, oh my goodness, I'm going to be okay. All right.
Yeah.
Because they're coming at it from a technician point of view of I make this much money and I take home this. If I do that, I'll take home that. They're not thinking of it as a business, right? They haven't done their research. Right, they haven't done what are labor rates in town. So if I'm I don't care how big or how small, check your marketplace out and go, okay, so what are people doing? So I got 2 guys at 45, I got a guy at 70, I got 3 aftermarket shops at 110, and I got the new car dealers running at 135 or 140. Okay, so what kind of cars are they working on? Go spy on them. Go sit across from them. What kind of cars are they working on?
Yeah.
Right. You know, some of the pain I hear on these chats. You know, I took this truck in for this and they wanted that. And it's like, dude, none of my clients work on anything older than. I mean, again, that's another conversation, right?
Yeah.
So if they would have done their research, they would have realized, oh, there's a range. But, oh my goodness, we can go down a million rabbit holes here. But here's the other thought process. Those people are ripping their customers off.
Yep. I hear it all the time.
All the time. That's a rip-off, right?
Yeah.
And then I try to use the analogy with a restaurant. I said, so what's your favorite burger place? And they'll say, right? I said, have you ever gone for a really expensive steak dinner? Well, no, because those places are a ripoff. Yeah, but they're always full. In fact, during recessions, the good restaurants are always still busy.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Because the people that have the money to go to those restaurants haven't been hurt by the recession.
Yep,
right?
absolutely.
So a lot of it is a mindset of, and again, I want to be positive, I want to be kind, but if you come from a mindset of not having a lot of money, you're going to attract people who don't have a lot of money, and you're not going to be successful. You could attract the middle person. You don't have to attract the wealthy or the people with a lot of cash flow, but you could attract the average person who's willing to pay that. So that's the other part, right? So that's a really hard one to answer. Did I do it some justice, right, to help people understand? Like, they have to research what's going on in the marketplace.
Yeah, for sure.
If the whole marketplace is capped out at 95, with somebody at 75 and somebody at 45 and stuff, okay, maybe 65 or 70 might be your place, your sweet spot in the middle, but. I mean, one of my clients is in an industrial mall. That's what do you call them? There's 12 shops in this place, all ranging from 45 to 175. And his Ryan's diag rate is like 200.
Right.
And he's not in pain. He's not crying. He's busy as he needs to be.
Yeah.
Because each of those shops is attracting who they attract.
Well, and I mean, one of the big things that always comes up is that in a lot of cases they will say, well, I want to be busy and I want to get cars in the door, and you'll pay attention to the shops that say, I'm 3 weeks out, I'm 4 weeks out. And if you start asking questions, you find out they've got a really low labor rate.
Yeah.
They're not charging much for parts, but they're not making any money, and they're fighting and they're clawing, and they're every day is a drag, man.
Yeah.
And they're fighting just to get enough money to pay the bills. When you see the other shop that says, I'm a week out, his guys are working on 3 cars a day, right? They're not killing themselves, so they're not worn out. He's not going through techs like crazy. He's not going through advisors like crazy. We're not working on a ton of cars. We're just fixing the cars that are in the shop, and we're making enough money to survive.
Yeah.
And so it's been worn like a badge of honor. Oh, I'm 3 weeks out.
Yeah.
I'm 3 weeks out. Dude, that's not a good thing.
Yeah. Have you guys heard my sushi analogy? Okay, so you could buy sushi in service stations, right? A little roll of 6 for $2.99.
David, would you do that?
I don't think I would. Would you eat gas station sushi?
Not gas station sushi. I got it from the grocery store, though.
Oh, yeah. I've had grocery store sushi. It's okay. But there's a restaurant in Tokyo that only 6 concierges at 6 high-end hotels know the location of. And you have to know these concierges. And it's usually people like Obama ate there.
Right.
That kind of thing. They have 10 tables. It's a chef's table. You show up and you just sit down and the sake comes out and they just serve you for the evening. And you leave with a bill converted to US around $1,000. Right. He's got 10 tables. And I always tell people, who's right? Churning out $1,000 worth of sushi in a gas station, or churning out $10,000 of sushi in a high-end Tokyo restaurant? Who do you want to be? I'm not going to judge you. Who do you want to be? Do I have a bias? Do I have a preference? I don't lean, I wouldn't have that's a little high-end, right?
Yeah.
But you're the entrepreneur. Where do you want to be in this? Do you want to be churning cars over for every day? Or do you want to slow it down, have that different clientele, a different type of a vehicle people don't want to invest in, right? So that's another analogy I use with people. I don't want to make people wrong in my teaching my podcast. I'll always admit my bias because my whole career started off in that world, service station. Yeah. Car count, 300 a day, no appointment book. First come, first serve. Guys, there's not enough bourbon.
Yeah. It'll drive you crazy. It will drive you crazy. And I've been on this big Seth Godin kick. David's about tired of it. But, in one of the videos that I've been watching, he's talking about marketing. And he's talking about, when Henry Ford came out and he said, you can have a car that's any color you want it to be as long as it's black.
Yeah.
Right? Because the paint dries faster and this is what we do. And that is not today's consumer. Right? They won't tolerate that. But there is a unique consumer for every product. And if we find our consumer that wants the product that we have and we tailor our product around them and build our product to fit that consumer, it can be a really cool thing.
Yeah. Well, one of my heroes qualified, because there are some things about him I didn't like, Steve Jobs, Apple. He invented things that nobody knew they needed. As soon as they touched them, they're like, ooh, I like this, right?
Yeah.
So in our world, the driving public, there's a lot of things they don't know they want until they experience it. So, for example, we've moved to a small community. There's some nice shops by nice people. They don't do it the way I train, so I'm a little edgy. But where I used to live in a big city, pick up my vehicle. I'm busy on Zoom and meetings, right? Talk about what, authorization digitally about what we're going to be looking at today. Send me a digital inspection. In one of my breaks, I take a look. I look at the estimate. I message back. We interact about the process. They finish it off. They deliver it to me. Send me the bill. I pay on my phone all throughout my day. There's people out there dying for that experience.
Yeah.
But they don't know how to ask for it because they've never experienced it. They don't actually know that people actually do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? My course, the last hotel that I taught my course at, three of my students were staying at the hotel. And at breakfast, the server said, "Hey, what are you guys here for?" "Well, we're taking this course with Murray, and we're in an automotive shop, and it's about great client care and great customer service." And she says, "Automotive shops do that? Care about customers?" The woman had a mental breakdown under thinking that shops were actually out there taking training to get better.
Right.
She thought that we were just a bunch of
hooligans,
right? Like Neanderthals taking their money, right?
That's David.
She was impressed. Right? Anyways, I got to get back to our numbers. So at a 70% gross profit, $30 an hour, $100, that's a $200,000 in sales for the year. Okay, so now you start, so what is that a month? Divide 200,000 by 12, that's what I got to do a month. All right? Generally 50-50 parts and service, so now we're at 400,000 to do that.
Yep.
Now divide that by the number of cars that you might think might come in. All right, so I did the math on a $400 average work order, which is not great. It's better than the average in the industry, but it's okay.
Yeah, the average is what, $350 right now?
Well, I have really recent numbers for Canada. New car dealers are $387, and aftermarket is $275. Like, it really sucks.
Cow.
And the dealers are taking more and more of it in Canada than ever.
That's crazy.
Yeah, right? My clients are all running, depends on the market because service rates will affect it. You have an area where a good rate's 120 and another area where a good rate's 170, you're going to have a disparity. But I got people, I think my top 30% of my clients are all 900 and above.
Yeah.
Right?
I want to say right now I'm 895 or right at
right.
895.
And I also track new customer count and I track customer retention. And some of these shops that say I would lose all my customers or I have to get my foot in the door or whatever, these are people that are doing the average work order size and are gaining 60. One guy, Bruce, 60 new clients a month.
Holy cow.
And I have an app that I use to measure active customers. So because shops lose customers or clients.
Yeah.
So I'm measuring, is he staying healthy? And he's staying healthy. And I'm asking him, what's your biggest source? I mean, he does the traditional marketing, like the SEO stuff and socials and stuff. But he said, almost everybody's word of mouth. We hear that you guys do good work. We hear that, can we keep this car longer? We've been thinking about replacing it, but, interest rates and cars, can you help us catch this up? Yeah. The last shop they were at did an oil change and left $2,000 on that car, go out the door, right?
Yeah.
That's that piece. That's what my mentor back in the day, Bob O'Connor, got my brain around is what I was leaving going out the door, right?
Right.
So let's go back to the 400,000, divide that by 88 invoices. Okay, so now I need 88 cars a month. Divide that by the number of days. I need this many cars a month. Okay, so now how do I get cars to come in to fill that void, right?
Yeah.
Of course, everybody starts with friends, family, and church acquaintances, and then learn very quickly that these people all want a deal.
Exactly.
Right?
They're the worst clients you could have.
And they're the first ones to accuse you of making money off their back or ripping you off, right?
Yeah.
So then they
create a mindset.
A mindset.
That is what other people think.
Yeah.
And,
right?
and because they expected that from
Nailed
you.
it. Nailed it.
Yeah.
You start your business and your whole experience is with people who want a deal. You don't understand that there's people out there that never ask for a deal because they didn't actually know. I did a consulting project for a parts company with a municipality. So large cities will have their own shops, right?
Yeah, fleet shop,
right? And this parts company was going to go in and put a parts room in for them. And they brought in the parts company, they brought me as a systems person, and they brought some environmental engineers in.
Okay.
Everything got to be run through the environmental people. All right. And I had lunch with these guys every other day. And this is like a 10-day project, right? And I said, hey, where do you guys take your cars? New car dealer.
Yeah.
And what do? I talk about aftermarket and emotional bank accounts and people, and the two of them looked at me and said, you can ask for a discount at the shop? They were like so confused.
Yeah.
They said it never occurred to us at the dealer to ask for it. It's what the bill is.
Yeah.
And then I had an insight. I said, so gentlemen, as engineers, when you send somebody a bill, you expect it to be paid. And they said, yeah. Do you give estimates? No, it just takes what it takes.
Yeah.
So their world, they just pay their bills as engineers. So they just pay their bills at the dealership.
When I was building the shop, I dealt with that, right? I dealt with that with the landscapers. I dealt with that with the construction workers. I dealt with that with the electricians, the plumbers, everybody else. And they would say, well, how can I give you I don't know, right? I can give you something rough, but I mean, it's going to change. There's no way to know what the bill's going to be. Yeah. And so you don't ask for a discount because you're not going to get one, right? It wouldn't matter if you did. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
And I mean, do you go to McDonald's and ask for a discount? Do you go to Walmart and ask for a discount? I mean, David does. He goes and takes a receipt in and says, hey, Target does it for this. Can you price match this?
No, I avoid that.
Is he a pathologically frugal guy?
No.
No.
I don't. I wouldn't have told that lady at dinner last night that she was supposed to only do one drink per. I wouldn't have said anything. I just won't go back.
Yeah.
That happens a lot.
Yeah.
That happens in shops. People just don't go back.
Yeah. So let's go back to the 200,000 in service sales. So I've taken 60,000 out. Well, I need a building. Okay, so 4,000 a month. Seems like a number I hear pretty commonly, even in smaller communities. So let's just round that to $50,000. So now of my 200,000, I've taken 60, another 50. That's 110. I now have 90. Can I realistically bill out $100 an hour for 8 hours a day as a new shop? No. The industry average in Canada is 4.2 to 4.3. I've heard some numbers down here about 5.3 per tech. I've actually worked with, and here's the thing, entrepreneurs listening, I have worked with 3 people that started off as a one-man show, right? And they now have multiple bays, multiple techs. They've grown the whole thing, so they did it.
Yeah.
Right? Started on a shoestring. But, I mean, they had coaching almost the day they opened.
Yeah.
Right? The one guy, no, he was about a year in before, but his brother had coaching, so he saw of his brother's stuff in another part of the country. But we did the math on him, that if he worked 8 hours a day, didn't work after hours, the best he could do by himself, the very best, was 5.3. Because he was answering the phones, he was dealing with everything else, right?
And that's pushing it. I think
this is pushing it. I'm going to say 3.8 to 4. Right?
Yeah.
So how do they then take enough money home to pay their bills? They're working 12, 14 hours a day, which you hear in all of those threads, right? People talking about the pain of that. So in reality, who's the next person you hire? Because that's the next question, right? Do I hire another tech? And in my case, my advice would be, if you are a good technician and you are a good producer, right, from your background and your experience, then you hire a service advisor to do all the rest so that you can actually bill out. So now let's take so we have 110 left. Now let's take another 50,000 off of that, right? And now we're down to 60,000. Now we divide 60,000, so that's 5,000 a month left over. Now I'm going to have software, 1,000 a month. I'm going to have insurance, 1,000 a month. I'm going to have marketing, 1,000 a month. Never mind my benefits to my staff, 1,000 a month. I can eat that 5,000 up in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
All right. So the questions that these people are asking: who do you use for insurance, or how do I get cheaper insurance? They're reasonable questions, but step back a little bit and go: have you built a small? And I'm not even talking about the business plans the way banks do it. Those are all BS.
Right.
They're just all smoke and mirrors. You guys know what I'm talking about with bank business. You know, I expect foot traffic to be this and road traffic to be this, and they're planning to build a new stadium 17 years from now, and I believe all of that will affect my business, and I want to borrow $500,000, and the bank may or may not give it to you. I'm just talking about just doing what I'm saying is, what do I want to take home?
Financial plan.
What's my rent, my occupancy cost going to be? What are the different things I'm going to need to run my business before I start? And they're going to shock the pants out of themselves how fast it all adds up.
But you know what keeps happening is that they don't know what those things are, right? Because you've never done it, so you don't know what those numbers are. You don't know what's coming.
Yeah.
And the fear that we have is that they go out and they start something and they say, and David even advocated for this with a mobile guy a while back, well, I don't need insurance. right? Because, it's not that big of a deal. And I don't really need workman's comp because it's just me right now. And I don't need, or I'm going to buy the cheapest insurance possible. I will never forget a conversation I had with my insurance agent once. He came in and we were talking about it. And it was when I learned the difference between an aggregate and a cumulative limit on insurance, right? And all of a sudden I'm like, he's like, what? I see the look in your face. And I'm like, dude, I've got like 20 cars sitting out here and they're $40,000 a piece. And he's like, yeah, well, first of all, it's only going to cover the first car that was damaged. It's not going to cover the others. If somebody runs into it, somebody wrecks and hits all the cars, like only one car's covered, the first car that was hit.
Yeah.
Hold up now.
Or what like, if there's 7 in the building and the building goes up?
Right. And so I'm talking to him and he's like, yeah. He's like, man, you wanted the cheapest insurance. This is what the cheapest insurance is. This is what it does.
Yeah.
And so we start talking and we're talking about all the different aspects and we talk about tools. And he's like, well, so I've got you down for $30,000 of tools, like contents and et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, dude, I've got millions of dollars of tools in this shop.
Yeah.
And he's like, we probably need to make some changes. Holy cow. I didn't think anything about that. Right. And so the whole time I was under this anticipation of something happened, I would be protected. No, I was nowhere near protected.
Yeah. That's a scary thought.
And so they're like, well, I just want it to be cheaper. You get what you pay for. That's all there is to it. And the insurance agent doesn't really care. It's not their problem. It's not their job to make sure. We look at insurance like it's going to protect us. It's going to protect you to the level you pay for it.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. And so I just think that they don't know the questions to ask. They don't know what to be looking for.
Yeah. Right. And you talked about equipment. Okay. So chances are you don't own any of you don't own any lifts. You don't own any other stuff. You have your toolbox you just rolled out of your last shop you worked at. Right.
Yeah.
So now you're going to be leasing $3,000 or $4,000 a month, like your payments to pay off that equipment. Right. So then you say, well, I have all my parts margin. So I have my $200,000 in parts. I have $200,000 in profit from that. Well, okay, let's talk about, $100,000 in leases or equipment purchases that first year to be able to do the job properly. Mm-hmm. Well, no, I can lie on my back or, like, Lord help you. You were complaining and bitching about how bad the conditions were at the last shop you worked at.
And so you're going to take a job with way worse conditions.
And
do it for free.
And do it for free, right? So I hope this is making sense to everybody listening, right? So just sit down and do some real rough, piece of paper, a little spreadsheet, whatever you're good at, and just write out and ask questions. Like ask, what does it all take to run a shop besides, right? So then there's the if you do hire an employee, then there's the state and federal portion that you have to contribute to the taxes, payroll taxes. And, then there's remitting your state and federal sales taxes and whatever you guys got, right? And is that money being set aside, right? You guys have promoted that Profit First book, I think. Mike Michalowicz, I think I'm saying it right.
Yeah. So I can't say it
ever since you talked about that guy that was always popping the mic, I'm just like thinking to myself, how am I doing?
No, you're good.
You got the headphones on?
You're good.
I'm doing good.
You're doing good.
Like, I don't want to be self-conscious and be that guy that you have to edit.
Nah, you're good.
All right,
you're completely good.
And I'll avoid the F-bombs.
No, that sounds boring.
You got to just say earmuffs. You just got to say earmuffs before. Earmuffs, kids.
Earmuffs. Awesome.
Now you got to say a bad word because you just said earmuffs. They're all going to be waiting for it, David.
Poop.
There you go.
Anyways, this leads into another part of the conversation. Is why do you want to start your own shop?
Okay.
Like sit down and ask yourself that question. Why? Right? Is it because I want to make more money? Is it because I want flexibility? Is it because I can do it better than my boss? Ask yourself the question. All right? I believe there's a common pattern where they don't think about it, but they don't get along with anybody.
Yeah.
Right? For whatever reason.
Yep.
They don't get along with their coworkers. They don't get along with their bosses, so they think they're going to open up their own shop. Now, think about this. If you haven't learned as a human being, as a young adult or an adult, to get along to some degree in a work environment, what kind of an owner are you going to be?
Yeah.
You don't know what good behavior looks like. Right? People keep asking me for leadership training. You know what? Leadership training is actually just listening, being kind. I mean, there's more to it. I do have some...
Obviously.
leadership training stuff I do. But at the end of the day, a lot of good leadership, you won't have those skills if your plan is to grow the company. How are you going to do that?
It's interesting that you say that, because one of the things that I've really prescribed to in my own personal life is that if you want to lead people, you have to be going somewhere, right? And if you're going to be going somewhere, you can either be going on a personal agenda, or you can be leading, which means you're taking them on a journey, because people want to be on a journey. They don't want to be, in a job anymore, right? Yeah. Especially this next generation, because, I've talked about the guys who worked for my parents who, I really just want to make enough to sit at home and play video games, right? I've talked about some of the people who say, I don't care what I make. It's my purpose in life that I'm trying to achieve, and I'm trying to figure out where that is. I'm trying to find somewhere that fits with that in my belief system. That's more important to me than money. Okay. Yeah. And so if you're going to lead people, you have to be going on a journey. And if you're going on a journey, you have to know where you're going. You have to have some idea of what it is we're trying to accomplish, what it is we're trying to do. And the problem that I see is so many people show up, and what do they say? I just want to start a shop. Why? Like you said, what are we trying to accomplish? Where are we trying to go? What is it that we're trying to do? Yeah. Because if we don't have that information, and one of the, Rick was my coach for years, and one of the hardest conversations, and I mean, dude, he drilled and drilled and drilled and drilled and drilled until I was so mad at him. Like, where in the hell are you going? And I would give an answer, and he's like, no, that's stupid. And I'm like, and he's going to be mad because he didn't say it was stupid. But my point is...
he wasn't, just as you thought his comment was.
Right,
hey, Rick, I'm defending you, bud.
But my point is that the reasons I continued to give weren't really reasons. There were these basic thoughts about where we were and where I thought I was going.
Yeah.
And the problem is that none of it was solidified.
Yeah.
And so in life, I was just kind of like meandering, doing this thing, and I didn't have a vision of where I was going to go. I couldn't see it, smell it, taste it, hear it, right? And so every time something came my way, I would give up on it. And, one of my favorite videos of all times, they talk about core values. He says, well, what is core? And he says, if I were to say the coronary department in the hospital, because everybody said center. He said, if you think of the coronary department and a coronary procedure, he said, the meaning of the word is heart. And he said, if you have a core belief, it is your heart. It is what you are. It is who you are. We talk about ethics, morals, and values, right? If those are inside and you build a business around what it is you truly believe, and that becomes your destination, where you're going, then we act on those beliefs, right?
Yeah.
Not on where we think we want to be tomorrow. And so by drilling down, I figured out what those core beliefs were. Yeah. Things I'd never thought about.
Yep.
Things I never understood, and began to find this direction and this pathway that got me where I wanted to go. Yeah. And so, I know a lot of shop owners, and we talked about it with a couple other guests, is like, well, you once you accomplish what you think your vision is. Yeah.
How are we doing for time? Oh, no, we're good.
Yeah. And once you accomplish what your vision is, and you say, well.
So my wife and I use the term living with intention.
Yeah.
To describe what you just laid out, right?
Yeah.
Living with intention. It comes from the core values. And the thing that anybody listening going into business needs to understand is your clients or whoever comes to your door are going to feel your intentions.
Yes.
So if your intention is to fix cars, they'll go, you'll attract car fixers. You'll attract people who fix their own cars, but only bring you the stuff they can't figure out. If your intention is to just make money, people will read that all over your face, and they won't come to you because they'll know that you're trying. But if your intention is to serve the person, is to help them with their transportation, understanding the cost of the transportation, helping them make decisions about this thing they drive that they have no clue about, and your intention is to serve them, then all of a sudden you build this huge business. Because the people understand what your intention is to serve that. The money always follows. The money always follows when that. And so then you don't have to worry about your 65 rate or your 45 rate and getting your foot in the door.
Right. It does not matter. And one of the greatest quotes of all time was like, I ask people all the time, and it's in a video that I talk about, but he says, I ask people all the time what makes a great friend. And he said, all these people say, someone who accepts me as I am. And he said, that is such dangerous garbage to believe because the dude at McDonald's accepts you as you are because he doesn't care anything about you.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same with your consumer, right? If you don't care anything about them, they're just a number. It becomes a transactional process. I'm just here to fix your damn car.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that is not what the majority of consumers want today. There are some that just want their car fixed. But that's not exactly the client that I would want in my shop. That's not a client that's easy to deal with. That's not a client that's easy to work with.
The research repeats itself over and over and over again. 55 to 60% of the driving public would like to have a relationship with their automotive service provider.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the service providers aren't offering it in some markets, right? So this brings you another topic. And you guys will take the heat. You'll probably pass some of it on to me, but you guys will take the heat.
No, I will take it. We're good at it.
You got big shoulders. So was asked in my first 4 or 5 years of coaching, who are the best shop owners or who are the easiest to coach or who are the ones that implement the fastest? Like what do you see as you're coaching people? The new term these days is, who are the most coachable, blah, 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 right? So I thought about it. And I went through my whole list of coaching clients and some of them I had to ask some questions to find out because I know some of them more personally than others. You know what I discovered?
What's that?
The technicians that came from families that sat down for dinner, didn't have to be every day, but sat down for dinner together as a family is one common thread. The second common thread is that their parents talked about their jobs and talked about the world and talked about life. Tended to be a little bit more of the professional end, right? Teachers, doctors, lawyers, accountants, stuff like that, right? But it seems like when you're a human being who gets interested in becoming a technician, right? You have the aptitude, you have the desire to fix cars or whatever. Yeah. It's an interest. Come from homes where people talked as a family and they talked. So it wasn't so much about the parents' education, but it was the fact that they were taught critical thinking.
Yeah,
is what I want to come to. So these people that said we did it on 25 grand, I did it on my credit card, I did it on whatever. The ones that did do it, that won the lottery and didn't fail. I'm going to have a hunch. I'm going to throw it out there that I bet you they already had a bunch of critical thinking skills.
Yeah.
And they learned so much faster that the mistakes happened less often that take the other shops down. Because we're all living in a world where we're adapting and making mistakes. I mean, I made several today already.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just how impactful were those mistakes to everything going on in the business or into your life or whatever, right? So I'm just wondering hypothetically if that's a little bit of what's going on there. What is your background, right? Do you have that? If I have some great clients who I respect very highly, who are very intelligent, very good business people, who have a 10th grade education. Because in Canada, you can actually go from 10th grade into a program, which is a pre-apprenticeship program, and then you finish the rest of your high school and you have your first year apprenticeship. So, you get your 12th grade or your grade 12, as we call it in Canada. But more kids are getting it now than in the past. But I work with people that have a 10th grade education, but they've become learners. They've realized that, you know what, I need to keep reading and learning and that kind of stuff like that. So if some of your listeners and some of the people in these threads that we read, come from a background where they're very good at fixing cars. Don't get me wrong. This is not about intelligence. Because there's all kinds of intelligence out there, right. But the whole idea being is maybe read a few books, right? Understand what critical thinking is and things like that.
Right.
I think it'll serve you well. I mean, so we've got from very specific numbers to some very broad conceptual things, right? In terms of helping young people that are making decisions to go into business, right? I mean, the numbers are out there. Yeah. Both of our countries measure success of businesses. 80% of them fail in the first year. Doesn't matter what it is.
Absolutely, and if you don't have, and I think that's the reason I've always said, if you don't have that 100,000 to put up, right? And for me, it's not even necessarily about the fact that you need 100,000 to start the shop. It's that if you don't have 100,000 to lose, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like if you're not in a spot where you can afford to lose a little bit of money, so you need to really think about this before you jump in this.
Yeah. And most of them are not in a spot to lose money. Most of them are in a spot to go into debt for that amount.
Yeah.
Because the banks, used to, maybe not as much now, used to give people at least some starting loans, right?
one of the scarier things that I see with these guys starting shops is they will go out and they will put all of this on a personal credit card. They will go out and they will take personal savings. They will go out and they will take personal loans to do this.
Yeah.
And they say, well, it's too hard to get a business loan. Buddy, let me tell you something. The bank still wants that money back, even if that business fails. And so you can set yourself on a really rough 30 years. Really rough 15 years, really rough 7 years if you do that, because now it's going to make everything in life. If you need credit, you want a credit card, you need flexibility, you want to buy a new car, taking a hit like that, if you have to go bankrupt or if you even get behind on it, can take years to undo that damage.
Yeah.
I'm not big in using credit. Like I use the heck out of it. Everything I have is credit right now. But you know what I mean? Like I would not have the potential to have built the shop that I built. And like I think back about how many times I could have made a stupid little mistake somewhere.
Yeah.
And I would not be where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you've got to think about that moving forward. What's the course?
So I've got one last topic that I think we can help some of these people with. Okay. Right now, one of my clients had 2 shops, sold one to a technician / advisor.
Yeah.
Just happened a few months ago.
Right.
Okay? Been with him. He's only been with him for 4 or 5 years. He was with another former client of mine, and he wanted to expand and grow. The other shop was a bit too small for him.
Okay.
All right. I know of 2 more shops just this week where the 2 senior techs are buying shares in the company. Okay. So, are you a good technician? Can you put out reasonable work? Can you work together with your coworkers? Can you follow procedures? Can you work with an owner, right? Do well at that. And then let's find these guys some owners that they can go work for, owners with a vision to establish the next generation of owners, because they need a succession plan, right?
Yeah.
And I know in the States there's a lot of consolidation happening, a lot of chains buying up shops. Canada, it's just tiny bit starting. So there's not a lot of consolidation. Like the only buyers you're going to have succession plan is usually, an employee. There's a bit of outside buying, but and so why don't we get some of these young people to think about getting better at getting a better job, because we're looking for people. So getting a better job where they're at and starting to take home that $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year, right? Playing nice, finding a good shop to work at, and then saying to the boss, hey, listen, I don't know much about business. I'd like to learn more about business.
Yeah.
Is there a chance of ever buying shares in this whole thing? And can we do a 5-year plan, 10-year plan? I'll go to business college at night or whatever. Why not buy shares into something that in 10 years is not a $400,000 shop? It's a $2 million a year shop that you now own.
Yeah.
Because you've been patient for 10 years and now you own it. You haven't taken hardly any risk.
Yeah.
Because you're actually buying, you might put in a little bit, some of your own skin in the game for the first set of shares, but then you're buying the rest of the shares out of net profit. There's really no risk.
I think so many of the ones who are wanting to do that, right? So many of the guys who want to start a shop are wanting to start a shop because they're disgruntled.
They're what?
Right? They're disgruntled.
Yeah.
They're upset. They're frustrated. They're mad about something that this owner has done or said or the way the shop ran or however it was. And in those cases, what I found is usually they think they're alone in that, but usually the shop owner is also disgruntled with them, right? A little frustrated with them.
Exactly.
And so what do you say to them? Because that opportunity can be off the table if that's the case.
Well, so you hinted at it. Maybe they should talk.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Right. If it is a one-way street and it is a bad owner, do your research. Start finding out what does it look like to work at a good shop, right?
Yeah.
And there's fear involved in making changes. I understand that, but take some risk there. If it's a one-way street the other way, where you're disgruntled and grouchy old tech, and the owner's trying to work with you, where did you get your attitude from? What trauma did you go through, or what kind of personality do you have? So here's another thing that I talk about, and again, I'm trying to avoid stereotypes, but it is a generalization. Allen Test Products back in the day did a study on all their salespeople, who most of them were former technicians.
Yeah.
And they found that 52% of them had some form of dyslexia.
Yeah.
Now, this is in the late 90s. I think I may have mentioned that to you.
Yeah.
And then more studies have been done with ADD and all that kind of stuff. And so a common thread is the brain wiring that makes you great at car repair because you visualize in pictures, you see the gears, right? You all that kind of thing also contribute to some of the other brain wiring that doesn't fit in our school system. And if the school system is a bad experience for you, you then come out of school with authority issues and down the spiral we go.
For sure.
Right?
For sure.
So could we, everybody take a big deep breath, right?
Yeah.
And could we meet together? Could we talk and look at the potential of these people and talk about that? And let's admit that some of us are not going to be entrepreneurs. Some of us are not going to be business owners. I have 3 children. Yeah. One's not an owner, but he is in management of a business, right? My other 2, I'm very proud of them, but they're, in companies that they like and they're doing well, but they're never going to be the entrepreneur, right? Yeah. That's not their interest. They like to come home when their job is done and be with their kid or have their other hobbies or other interests, right? Yeah. That's right. So we have to understand, not everybody's going to be an airline pilot. Not everybody's going to be a chemist, right? And I think we have to help young people understand that maybe you're not cut out to be a shop owner just because everybody around you. I mean, with respect to the multi-shop owners around that are doing very well, there seems to be a culture down here of you're not cool unless you have more than one shop. And I'm kind of like, what's that all about?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Only the cool kids have multiple shops.
I
sorry, but why? Are you guys? You guys are smiling. Am I picking up on a vibe?
Yeah. It's a thing. Yeah,
it's a thing.
You mentioned the fact that everybody take a deep breath, right? We caught some flack over one of our last videos, and one of the things we said is like, hey, just go find another shop, just quit, just move on. And they're like, oh, it's not that easy, and you don't understand what I'm going through, and you don't. And so what I would say is exactly what you said. What I'd say to those guys is take a deep breath, right? This is not about picking on techs. This is, and I commented on a thread the other day, and it was about a timing belt. And I said the idler failed. One of the pulleys failed after they did other repairs. They didn't do the idler repair. And I made the comment, and I knew that it was going to go sideways when I made the comment, but I said, hey, If you did not tell that client that every 90,000 miles they're supposed to replace the timing belt and the idler pulleys, then in some way, sense, or form, you take a little bit of responsibility for 100%. This. And everybody got upset and they said, how in the world could you say that? There is no way he caused that to fail. And I said, it has nothing to do with saying he caused it to fail. It has to do with taking ownership of the problem. And they said, why would he take ownership of a problem he didn't cause? And I said, I'm not talking about taking ownership in such a way, a legal manner or a manner where we're saying this was our fault. I'm saying if we acknowledge and say, what could I have done to make this different? What part of this do I own? Then guess what? You own the solution to the problem.
Well, I believe it's an agreed practice, a recommended practice, that the idler is changed with the belt.
Yep.
The technician feels it, and it feels fine. The question that the technician, and then they don't call it because, well, it feels fine now. The question that the technician should ask themselves, number one, is why was it recommended? And is that's legitimate, first of all. But will it make it another 90,000 miles? No, it won't. So now my client's going to come back and need the idler because now maybe they hear a rattle before it jumps or whatever, right? So I'm with you on that. There is a legal and moral obligation to do it by the book.
In this case, though, they were not doing the timing belt.
I misunderstood. Okay,
yeah, they just didn't make a recommendation on their repair order that said, hey, or tell the client, hey,
right.
every 90,000 miles. And so people got upset at me because I was saying, like, if you didn't make a recommendation for it. And so my point is that if you make that recommendation, right, guess what? Now all of a sudden it's a moot point, right? It doesn't matter if they're upset because as soon as they pick the car up, well, I'm sorry, but you declined the timing belt service. And everybody said, well, why do you believe that? Why would you say they should take ownership? I'm not saying dude should pay to put a motor in her car. I'm saying if we take ownership of that problem and say, how can I fix that internally? Yeah. How can I make sure that I protect myself? How can I make sure that doesn't happen again? And so what I have learned through that process and making some of the comments I make, and I make a lot of comments in the groups that are kind of like to spur that conversation or spur that thought that's not like everybody else's thought, and try and get them to think outside the box a little bit. And so one of the things I'm always trying to think about is what does ownership of a problem look like that for me? And I have watched so many people that have a seriously hard time with taking ownership of what part of this problem do I own?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so if you watch them and you say something about that, and so a lot of technicians, and I can point it out, you can go look through the YouTube comments. You can see the technicians who don't want to take ownership of their part of the problem.
Yeah.
It's not to say that all the problem is them. It's not to say that they are the ones causing all of this. It's to say, yes, we know there are bad owners out there. We know that everything's not perfect in our industry.
Right.
What can you do to fix it, for God's sakes?
Right.
Because as long as it's somebody else's problem,
nothing's going to happen.
Then nothing will ever change.
And you're just a victim.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you own the problem, guess what? Now I'm not the victim anymore.
Yeah.
Now I can do something about it.
Exactly. And that just making that decision opens the human brain up to problem solving. It's like if you're suffering from depression and these kind of things, and again, being very respectful to people, having gone through some stuff myself.
Yeah.
Being grateful first thing in the morning for a couple of things rewires your brain.
Absolutely.
Taking responsibility, not being a victim, rewires your brain. And the next thing you know, solutions begin to pop to mind that you had never thought of before, right? I want to address this from two other angles. One is go to a doctor for a blood test. Blood test indicates cholesterol, indicates blood sugar issue, and indicates PSA, prostate. Mm-hmm. Doctor's really uncomfortable talking about prostate, so just talks about the blood sugar and the cholesterol. Did he just set himself up for a malpractice suit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know that the same laws in court would apply to a shop?
Mm-hmm.
That customer could actually have sued that shop?
Yeah.
Because you did not inform them professionally of this is what the recommendation is. Now, I'm not about to go tell the driving public this because it's so bad out there. I don't want to create more problems for shops. It is our ethical and moral obligation to inspect, identify, recommend, manufacturer's recs, the whole bit. It is not our job to sell it. Our job is to document the decision the client made. Yep. And good advisors know how to help people with that decision. And then sales come out of that. That's all. It's easy.
And even if, right? So even if, and somebody mentioned this yesterday, going to court over something like that is a 1 in a million scenario.
Exactly.
Right? But for me, it's not about protecting myself necessarily from liability. It's about making our industry better.
Yeah.
It's about creating a better image of our industry, and that's part of what causes us to have a bad...
It's that doctor looking after me and caring about me.
Yeah.
It's looking after that person. I want that
exactly.
Right? So one more thing, you talked about technicians not being able to take responsibility. I also see a segment of technicians not being able to make the call. They won't call it on a vehicle. They dodge it, they avoid it. But I've identified where that comes from.
Okay.
That actually is an ownership problem because a new technician who's terrified of offending customers. Technician identifies brakes and says, we need brakes. And then the owner comes back and looks and says, well, no, that they still got another mill on them. I think we can probably get a few more weeks out of this. And the technician's like, oh, okay, boss. Well, do that for 6 months. Technician is not going to call anything. They're going to go to the boss and say, boss, what do you think?
Yeah, and because the boss is absolutely, the boss is afraid of making the call because he doesn't want to piss the client off. So
then he's taught his technicians not to make the call.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
It's all cause and effect, dudes.
Amen. Murray Voth, thank you for being here, buddy.
Thanks, guys. Awesome being here.